First of all, thanks everyone for joining today's call. My name is Nelson Cunha. I'm based in Lisbon, Portugal. And as Ashley explained, I'm the product owner for AP. We all know that the AP is the accounts payable module in JD Edwards is not the most advanced module, sometimes a bit limited in a way that the accounts payable department always is under pressure to meet deadlines and relies on all sorts of good data coming from procurement, from transportation modules, etc. So hopefully after today you see at least that APA can indeed boost your efficiency around accounts payable. Yeah, apart from being a product owner, I'm also a managing consultant here with a finance background. This is what led to me here today. So what is accounts payable automation? There's plenty of products out there. Most of them sit outside JD Edwards. The one we will present to you was developed by Steltix and it's all embedded in JD Edwards. So it looks and feels like any JD Edwards application. So users that are familiar to work with JD Edwards for many, many years easily adapt APA, so they don't have to go outside JD Edwards still to do their daily activities, okay? What we present to you is a SaaS product. So Steltix developed APA. We often make bug fixes, new enhancements, new features. That's why we adopted the SaaS methodology, let's say, as we can provide paper fixes. So it's like a constant relationship with the APA customers. Our focus is not only to boost automation, but also to get rid of paper. Many of the accounts payable departments where we implement JD Edwards, right in the very beginning, they still rely a lot of paper. Often they get papers, stamp them, and then archive. Well, with APA, we will get rid of that. The customers where we implement APA, gladly, they get rid of paper from 1 month to another. We offer voucher escalations. So whenever there's an issue with the invoice, regardless if it's like the goods were not received or the PO is not existent, or we don't even know who the supplier is, we have now a feature, escalations, that avoids you to reach out other areas or colleagues with a typical email or a phone call. And why? Because this gives traceability and helps to build the history and auditing behind the invoice, and to give visibility why AP struggles sometimes to book a single invoice, or why there's delays on payments. So in a way, we are empowering the accounts payable personnel. Not only these personnel, but we also increase a lot the control in JD Edwards. So we can set approval workflows. I will explain in more detail ahead, but also the managers, when depending on the area or business unit around the system, different managers or approval personnel can be involved, one or multiple, and with different criteria. So hopefully at the end of the session, it will be clear to you. And again, to reinforce, if you have a pristine system, you would keep on being pristine with APA. So we don't change any code in the system. We only add Steltix developed code. So you can keep your system entirely clean with APA. Okay. I've started this adventure a few years ago, and I'm happy that we took the decision back then to adopt e-invoicing. I don't know if e-invoicing is a term familiar to the companies in South Africa, but around the world it's growing, and we see a lot of APAC regions, a bit in South America, In Europe is starting. Some countries are adopting. So you see like the countries in different levels all around the world. So with APA, you have an invoicing ready solution. And by this, I mean, we import XMLs into JD Edwards. This option gives us, so we designed this feature around the e-invoicing format, of course, but also allows us to work with any OCR in place. We also have customers that have their OCR on premises, the old one, and we can still operate with those. So if you have one, it's not, it may be suitable with APA if there's an XML output. So this flexibility allows us to have a tool which does not require any OCR implementation. From one day to the other, you can have your invoices in JD Edwards. I'll explain you why. And also not having this dependency with a typical OCR allows us to increase and boost the implementation period as well. Also to worth mention that often we do updates. Those can be found on Steltix website. I'll share the website during the call. So I don't know if you have the standard and pure accounts payable JD Edwards. Here we have a picture that would maybe mirror your AP when it goes bad. So we often see, like I mentioned before, invoices being printed and stamped manually, prepped by order, etc. So a lot of work that is done manually and outside the system, causing unnecessary delays. Everything is manually entered. Often it could be that the paper is lost and the invoice is stuck in a drawer somewhere. So maybe the invoice is gone. So we have a lot of chance to lose track of invoices. We have poor visibility in the end. Loss of control because it relies on one user, one person, to check errors, right? It's while I'm entering the transaction that I can actually see the error. If it does not allow for me to proceed, I have to cancel and go back maybe the next day and the next day and the next day, right? So it's a lot of manual entry information, manually checks. And also the approval sometimes relies on an email or a phone call, and that's it. So no control as well. In the end, all of this is wasting time, resources, and it leads to having, by the end of the month, barely, sometimes you don't have a updated AP position. The trade accounts will not be entirely correct, or the taxes as well. So what we want to with APA is to help you achieve this on a daily basis. So from day one, from when the supplier sends you the invoice, these will be stored automatically in JD Edwards. So no longer need to have those archives. These will be stored in JD Edwards. You will visualize the document in JD Edwards, so your archiving will be JD Edwards from this point onwards. By the time these documents get to JD Edwards, they will also be converted into a temporary invoice, let's say, which requires check. It's like in a staging phase where you need to check the data, if it is all okay, check the errors that APA already gives to you. And if it is all okay, it can be processed as well in one step. With that, we offer the approval workflow. And like typically in JD Edwards, you have a huge menu to maintain all of this. Hopefully you'll be surprised with that we only work with one application. Only one application suits everything, okay? And then hopefully to have a reliable AP position by month end, on weekly basis, etc. How does this all work? So your suppliers do send you your invoices, and it could be by paper, by email, by a letter. It could be electronically as well. Why not? Invoicing. So regardless of how you get this, these will be included directly. They will be stored in a temporary folder, FTP by email or API. If these will be already in an e-invoicing format, please disregard information you see on screen, because these will be ready from the very beginning to be imported to APA automatically. But because the market is not there yet, and the percentage of invoicing that is going back and forward these days is not at least 100%, we rely on some partners, let's say, that do that conversion for us. So we can work with typical OCRs, but we also can work with these partners that they convert whatever kind of output, invoices coming from our suppliers in a digital format, they will convert to e-invoicing files. These are two partners that we work with, our recommendations, but there's many others out there, of course. And all of this is to make sure that we get the XML, the e-invoicing file, right? And with that e-invoicing file, we have a Steltix mapper, which is a feature of APA, which allows us to retrieve information. So basically converting the XML data, the metadata, into JD Edwards knowledge, right? For instance, how do we identify the supplier that is sending us? Okay, this could be unique to any customer. So we made this no-code tool that allows us to fetch and enrich information with your JD Edwards database. Okay. And all in one step. Remember, this is all automated. You would have the invoices every morning sitting in APA. Okay. APA copes with all voucher entry in JD Edwards, available in JD Edwards. So we can do logged vouchers, standard cost vouchers, two-way match, three-way match, and also freight match if you have the transportation modules in place. Okay. So how does this work? The import process. This is the first step. It not only imports and stores the archives in JD Edwards, but also does the auto match. It tries to match with a purchase order, with a GL account, if it's a standard cost voucher, etc. And it will check all errors, more than 100 these days. And if there's any error that is identified by the system, it will be popped out and stored with that same record. So you no longer have to enter a voucher to see what error it has. The errors will be logged into the invoice. Okay. After importing, validating, the processing. Only when you confirm the imported invoices, those will be processed. And by processed, I mean only then the voucher will go to your accounts payable menu. Okay. Depending on the approval workflow that you adopt, while it's waiting for an approval to take place, the invoice will be set on status age held for payment. So you won't be able to pay the invoices while they are not fully approved. Okay. The errors check, we will see quite some examples and how we interact with those errors. As an example, order no longer has available quantity, the supplier has information missing, or the invoice has been escalated, so you can't process it. Okay. After process, like I said previously, approval routing takes place. You can have one or multiple approvers. Once they all approve, only then the pay status is set to A and approved for payment. Okay. I'll now switch to JD Edwards. I don't know if there's any questions so far. I want this to be as interactive as possible. So let me know if you have any questions, okay? Just raise your hand in the call. So what you see here is, let me just zoom in a bit. So this would be the CAFE1 page for APA as an example. So similar to what we saw on the slides, we only have 3 steps, right? Import vouchers. We have the APA workbench where we will handle all the invoices and the processing. Now, these two, they can be automated and set on a scheduler. So every morning I would import all incoming invoices. Maybe we can do it 2 times a day. So these are not manual steps normally, okay? So I would only work with APA to see what's going on. So let's take a look. So this is our workbench. While I enter here, I have predefined filters, okay? I will go through them. I have over here on the bottom all pending invoices. It could be pending to be processed, pending to be approved, etc. And here on my right side, I have the electronic invoicing and the PDF, okay? Always those 2 inputs are required. So we have here examples of invoices and also the XML, which is the invoicing file. Both of these content will follow the transaction until the very end. Once we process into our accounts payable, the same repository documents can be linked to a transaction, so I can always put this information available, okay? Because we can work with multiple screens, I can have both information and easily pop out. So if I need more details out of the PDF, I can also scroll back to the PDF and pop out. So it's quite easy to use, and people having 2 screens, definitely it helps, okay? So like I was saying, this is our workbench. This is where the accounts payable department will work on after having APA in place, okay? We have here match routines. So the system will determine match routines. So depending if the invoice has a purchase order information or if it has a cost account information, the system will automatically suggest one of these matching or suggestions to match the invoice, right? Could be a voucher match, which is the most typical, to match against the PO, cost voucher, and notice that the process routine and number of suppliers, number of invoices changes there. Or undetermined, where the system has no information and is clueless about what to do. Hopefully you don't get many of these, okay? Then you have the approval status. So customers adopting the workflow might be keen on knowing what is the status on approved invoices, how many they were approved. So I can see not only approved, but automatically approved. And I will explain why we have these 2, because we may set the workflow in 2 different formats, only to trigger workflow when there's variances against the purchase order, or all the time. So APA is also flexible in that point. I can see also who is pending, which invoices are pending, and on whom, which ones were rejected. I don't know if I have rejected ones, yeah. So these are all statuses given by the workflow, okay? We will see a few of them during the call. Also, I can see which invoices were processed, so which ones that have indeed booking documents in our AP, and the ones which don't have. They are still in errors or being escalated, okay? So this is the kind of filters we could do. Also, we can sort based on validation. So we could focus on errors only or warnings. We also store the warnings, or just look at the ones that are passed and unprocessed, for instance, that I want to process. There's none at the moment, okay? So for today, I imported a few invoices. I did it yesterday, so we can have and do a small exercise with auditing. So I can use also the date selection here on top to filter invoices that were imported throughout these days. Okay. And I want to see all match routines. So we will be working with the ones we have on screen. Again, to navigate with them, we can always have the PDF with it. So Again, there's no need to have paper, right? So the invoices that I imported, they were not processed automatically. I'm not selling the best scenario where everything goes well. I actually want to focus when it goes wrong. So for instance, this first invoice, we can identify here the supplier, which is automatically recognized, the supplier invoice number, the amount, the currency, and so forth. We store the date that is imported, and we want to keep track when it was processed, if it's pending, how long it's pending, and if it was escalated, to whom it was escalated. Okay. So this is a typical voucher match. So hopefully, hoping that you work with procurement systems. Okay. So if there's errors, I can inquire the errors just by clicking here, and I get a list of errors. And I wanted examples with as many errors as possible or warnings. So like in JD Edwards, you can you can have the warnings in place, and they will be shown as yellow. Duplicate invoice number, depending on your JD Edwards account settings, they can be set as an error or warning. So if your system sets you a warning today or an error, APA will also follow the same instructions, because APA, it sits above your accounts payable module, and it will look into all the setup that you have today. Okay. This is applicable also for document types that you use today. We will follow the same instructions. Okay. So on this invoice, we have the duplicate invoice number. We have quantity, the tolerance amount errors. So it means that we are trying to match way more than the PO. So this is also following the standard settings. In APA, we also, a bit to avoid not only paying to the incorrect bank account details, because we can prevent that in APA, but we also check the bank account details of an invoice if they are registered in your JD Edwards. If they are not, we will present you a warning or error, and you can update your bank account details through APA. Okay. These will go also for approval because we cope with payee control. So if you have this feature today, you would have it working with APA as well. Okay. We also have warnings that lines. It means that the receipt might be missing. So we have a various combination of errors on this one. Okay. So this is a normal situation with accounts payable that PO was not received. So I want to show you how you can handle this in APA. So in order to fix the errors or look at the detail of the invoice, I go into the detail. And this looks familiar to the voucher entry screens that you have in JD Edwards. We just have a bit more information because we have old codes, which is a feature that we don't have in standard JD Edwards. We can convert to a logged voucher with one click, etc. And we also have the errors on screen here. Okay. So while we fix the errors, we also see the number of errors and warnings going out. Here on the buttons, we have all the options that we set on this version of APA to match invoices. Some of the features here can be hidden or made available depending on the settings during the implementation. Okay. So here, validate and save is basically to refresh everything and refresh the number of errors and warnings. So while I work on the invoice, I can always refresh and see, okay, what else do I have to fix? Okay. The escalation, yeah, this can be done and I will do on this sample to escalate in order for the logistics to check why the goods were not received. Once they are received, I can indeed do the receipt to match. Okay. Or two-way match, or even freight match. Okay. So all the data out of the invoice was converted, and so whatever it was picked up on the electronic invoicing file or based on the PDF, it's now visible on APA. Okay. So in this case, we got the number of the purchase order X. That's why the system knows there's no receipt for this PO. Okay. There's multiple ways we can get this number. Either it's stated on the invoice, or sometimes we may have a reference or a delivery note. For instance, we have customers that we identify the PO numbers based on that, or even on pricing. So we can find multiple ways of automatically suggest here a purchase order number, and those are always services throughout the implementation. Okay. These settings is a soft no code, like I mentioned before. So it's just a period of implementation, how we can more accurately suggest the purchase order number. Okay. On top, we have a few extra details. So we control the VAT amount. So we want to keep track of the original amount that was given on the invoice, and we want to make sure that you book the total VAT, right? That we avoid any entry errors. We also have bank details. On this same example, we have bank details that were given to us. So this is a feature that can be enabled or disabled, but APA will check if they exist on your system. We also make use of cat codes, so we can relate cat codes to an invoice. Apologies. Not only cat codes, but also a few descriptions. So any naming conventions that you use in AP. As an example, we recently implemented on a food and beverage company, and they categorize the suppliers based on a product family. So that's how they divided the activities throughout the AP clerk. So some users will look at product family A, others to B, others to C. So this is how they split the invoices amongst them. So we made use of the cat codes, and we can get these all around the system. We could get them on the branch plant of the PO. We can get on company level, supplier level, you name it. Okay. Other information might be also provided. Tax IDs on the invoice, additional tax IDs depending on the country where you are operating, email, phone number. Everything is captured and stored in JD Edwards. Okay. The communication tab, it's at the moment empty, but we will begin the registry of this invoice. So let's begin. This is where you can see the messages back and forward around this invoice. So as we don't have the purchase order receipt for this one, this invoice, I introduce you the escalate feature. The escalate feature allows me to reach out personnel in my company that have access to JD Edwards. Okay. When I press escalation, it immediately filled in the message to my colleague Herr Klassen. He would be the buyer, so the person who raised the purchase order. Okay, so that's automatically suggested. This should be the owner of this process. But I can also look for any other employee in JD Edwards. So while in the past we would send an email, in APA we want to bring all communication to APA. Okay, so I can look for any other employee in my JD Edwards system. Okay. I also have a hold code. When I escalate, I'm waiting for further information or inputs. So I want to put the invoice on hold. Why on hold? To prevent anyone to change the invoice or to prevent anyone to process it while it's awaiting instructions. These hold codes act a bit like we have in sales module. So they can be even password secured. So in order for me to release the hold code, I would have to input the password. Okay. And on this type of escalations, I can type a message. For this PO. So any message is can be changed. I can send a message, and while I did send, notice that now our invoice is set on hold with the code ES, and these codes are totally configurable, okay? Back to my Apple Workbench. Now the invoice was set on hold. And I can see here the user hold code. And also I can see, okay, it was escalated to hair classing. Okay. At this moment, we can, while the message is on my colleague Hair, he can get an email, a reminder email, until he completes the whole process. Okay. So because normally these personnel are not AP, we made a separate application for handling the escalations. That can be found here on the, of course, they would have their own menu or cafe one, just to avoid SOD problems. But it would check the escalated vouchers. So we offer you some watch lists and notifications, like I said before, emails as well, where you can get these on your mailbox, and with a link, just go back to JD Edwards and handle the escalation. So on the escalation, and I'm here with the admin mode, I will log as Hair. So Hair as could have one or multiple escalations, right? So this is the one he has today, the one that we just did. It was escalated today at 12, at least the server time zone. And this is how he's communicated, okay? You can check the PDF, and then you can also messages back. So Nelson and myself, I reached him out on this day, this hour. I can, as a person who is handling this incident, let's say, I can check the details. So this is the OP number he refers to. Okay, let me check what's wrong with this OP. I can use the order inquiry screens or the standard JD Edwards to fix the issue. I'll just receive the goods in this case. So Hair at the moment is fixing the issue. Okay, I'll receive the goods. My mistake. Okay. Goods are then received. And back on my escalation screen, I can tell, okay, return, and I can put an old code. Okay, normally it would be nice to have an old code that suggests that the escalation has been returned. Okay, just telling Nelson, okay, I received the goods. It should be okay to proceed. Once I send out this message, the escalation is gone, no longer under Hair's name. Okay, and when I return to APA, now as AP clerk, the old code is returned. No longer it's escalated to anyone. So at this step, okay, I want to review the old code, because this is used to know, okay, I got some action pending on me. So I'll remove the old code and then I'll resume the voucher. Okay, so I'll release it. I got information from her. I go back to the invoice. I validate and save. Okay, no longer I have errors. So this is how the system is refreshed. Okay, I still have others like duplicated invoice number, but well, this is not something I would advise, but you can always change it. And then I'll be one by one getting rid of warnings, right? I wanted to leave the tolerance one because we want to trigger the workflow while processing. I can also check others. And the system is still warning about the bank account details. I can also fix those. So on the row exit, I can also update the bank account details of the supplier, or in case they don't exist, just add them. Screen. By adding the bank account details, we also improve our master data, which will increase and help the supplier recognition in the future. So we can use also this kind of information to know them. And one by one, you start to decrease the number of warnings and errors. So this is how you handle the errors in APA. So you don't have to constantly keep trying to add the transaction until the issue is fixed. You can actually live check what is the status of the invoice. You can do it on the detail, but also on the header inquiry. So you can check, and every day it will be updated the validation status. Okay, so they would be like in this staging phase until it's processed. If we are okay with the warnings, tolerance ones, the last very step to process, and if there's any error like this one, it will be refreshed at the same time. Okay. If there's errors like it's avoiding, so tolerances are preventing to move forward, and I need to pay the supplier. For instance, the goods are in transit, right? Or some situations like that. I can also, so we have a feature that we can convert any invoice to a logged voucher. If you're not familiar to a logged voucher, is that I can book the AP liability, and then once the goods are in, I can redistribute them. So that could be used also by month end to make sure we have our AP in and also the VAT registered. The log voucher, it could be set to have also an approval approver here. So I need to put an approver just to not have all the in there, and then I should be able to process. Let me see if I can move forward. Getting some errors in this one. Okay. Yeah, it's something wrong with this supplier, I think. So we saw a few scenarios on how we can handle errors on the system, and also if we can't book a voucher match to see how we can handle and deal with the errors. Okay. If I want to reverse and not book as a logged voucher, I can do it one by one, refreshed, and it's back to a voucher match. So it will continue awaiting to be booked as a voucher match. Okay. If it all is okay to be processed, like on this same invoice, this is a different invoice. So it will be set as passed. And while it's passed, yeah, we should be okay to process the invoice. And let me see if I can process one. Yeah, once it's processed, you get the process flag set with a Y. The booking document is assigned. The batch is creating in AP. And also the approval workflow is initiated, okay? The approval workflow, it depends on the type of voucher that we have. In this case, if it's a logged voucher, it could be set on the supplier level and then overridden manually. If it's a voucher match like this, we can define if you want to only approve variances or if you want to approve regardless if there's variances or not. And these approvers are also set up on APA here, on the workbench. So how do we link those? We do it by transaction originator, which in the end is the buyer, the person who is raising the purchase order. And it can have level breaks by company or business unit. So you can segregate in these two additional levels. And per each one, you have a logistics approver. The logistics would be responsible to approve variances on quantities, everything that is really tangible. The purchase approver list will be focused on amounts, right? Cash. So if they sent a different pricing compared to the purchase order, or if the extended amount is different, this person or persons will be responsible for approving the invoice. Okay, so 2 checks are done on the voucher match approval. This is how you can maintain it. If it is a cost voucher, so cost voucher is an invoice that has no purchase order, but instead hits one of the P&L accounts. It's different because we can, and I want to show you this one. So we can map by supplier and also wording of the invoice lines accounts. So just showing here how it works. So per company, per supplier, and per account ID, so by GL account, I can determine, override the VAT that is coming, the tax code that's coming from the supplier master, the tax type, and also assign an approval list, like a budget responsible for this account. How the accounts can be automatically assigned to an invoice. So on this case, on this supplier, regardless of the invoice, I would always suggest this account because it's our default account. For others, like the one we are about to see, we have specific wording. So depending on the wording coming from the invoice line, we will suggest dedicated lines. Let me show you. So looking at this invoice, we have this supplier over this company, and the lines, like on the physical invoice, they have different information. By different information, sometimes it could be just a wildcard, it doesn't have to be the whole wording. We can assign a GL account. Okay, so let's imagine that it says it's a Steltix invoice, it says consultancy. Every time we want to book to IT costs. And if it's like some kind of hardware or app licensing, right, it would be a different account. So we can assign based on wording, right? These wordings are found also on the APA, and with those we map to specific GL accounts. Okay. So it could be the same object count, different business units, and this is how the system separates it. Let me show you how the setup is there. If I look for this invoice, this supplier has, depending on the wording, and for one particular line, we have this wording, and it's saying, okay, it goes to other IT costs. And it has a specific tax and also different approval list other than the default account. Okay, so this is how you can automatically book standard cost vouchers. So you don't no longer have to manually input an account, etc. Okay, we can also check the errors on this one. Yeah, we check also variances if there's on amount. So we always get the subtotals of VAT, right? Like I explained before. On the totals tab, we always have the original net amount, the original VAT amount, gross amount. And this is handy because there's always calculation rounding issues with issues. I don't call it issues, but the rounding and the VAT calculation in JD Edwards is different compared to other systems, and the same happens with other systems. So often we see these rounding differences, either because the supplier calculates VAT based on total, not on line level. So for that, we made some features that allow you to automatically fix the rounding issues. So once you save it, it's then okay. It accepts the rounding issue on VAT and you are able to proceed. Okay. Warnings can be confirmed or not, depending on your requests. And once you process, you get the booking document and the workflow is initiated. Okay. So we got these two processed. They are now set on hold because they are waiting for approval. If they didn't met any criteria for approval, they would be already on pay status A. Okay. I can also see on who is pending on the screen, but I've hidden some of the columns. If you can also check on the workflow inquiry to see on who is pending any of these invoices. So on invoice level, I can see, okay, this is the person who is responsible to approve. Okay. If it was wrong, I can also reroute to a different approval. Okay. It copes with delegations. So I don't know if you have any workflow in place at the moment, but it will follow the same instructions as the workflow engine is the standard JD Edwards one. Okay. So yeah, they will be in this status until it's fully approved. Before heading to the approval process, just wanted to, I think I missed the communication tab. For instance, on this one that we were back and forward with the purchase order. Now you can see the communication tab. This will store all the communication and it will also be presented to the approver later on. These will be stored and also used for, can be used to calculate KPIs going forward or to see why it takes more time to process a Steltix invoice other than other suppliers, for instance. And this can be seen because we register every step of the invoice. So we offer auditing as well. So per invoice, we can see, okay, when it was imported, by whom as well, right? When it was escalated and when it was a hold code assigned to it. So all this information. So you have the escalation, when it was returned, what time, how longer it took for her to de-escalate. And we know when the bank accounts were requested to be updated until it's processed and fully approved. So all the stages will be found and registered to one single invoice. Okay. Just to show you how this looks in accounts payable, I'll just head to accounts payable. Okay. So I can go to my supplier ledger inquiry. And look for, let's say, today's invoice. It was booked with the previous date. Okay. And like I said initially, all the invoices, all the documents, so JD Edwards will now become your document repository. Okay. So these documents will follow everywhere the invoice in the system. Okay. So if you have auditors in-house, if they want to look at some samples, you can give them access to JD Edwards and they can look for the information themselves. Okay. These can be downloaded out of the viewer. I can store the PDF all the time. So no need for physical paper. All documents, of course, can be found here. So today we just processed a few. So all of these can be found here. Okay. Now, what is left is the approval step. I don't know if there's any questions so far. I know I've been talking for a while. Okay. So the approvals. The approvals are also handled in a separate application, as they can have it's for use for different personnel. So this is how it looks. I have all the pending invoices to approve here on screen. And I also have the PDF, of course, the document, and I can always look into the detail. And out of this, I have the options to approve, to reject, to reroute, to send someone else, and also to escalate. Depending on the type of voucher, I would see different information here. So if it's a purchase order related one, I would see the quantity received, the quantity matched, the amount received, the amount matched. In this case, it's a log voucher, so I will only see the GL distribution of the voucher, but I can always see the original versus matched amounts. Okay. And this is where I approve or reject. Steltix developed, I think you're familiar to Appshare. If you're not, I will show it. So most of the approvers, sometimes they are on field or they are not always in office. So we made app, so in our Appshare product. So you can log in from any device, mobile included, of course, and our desktop. This is how it looks on a desktop, and I will switch to, so this is the upper workbench. So I would see the exact same information as I was in JD Edwards. Okay, so I'll see all the pending invoices, and it's loading because I have quite a few. Just give him a second. There's also some statistics to see how many invoices are related, PO related or cost voucher related. So these are all the invoices that are waiting for me to approve. Okay, so I have all of these to approve. I can see the dollar amount, etc. These can also be seen on a mobile. So this is the look and feel if I want to approve on my mobile. So it works on a browser, so it switches to any screen format. I think I'm a terrible approver as I have many to approve. And remember, until it's approved, it will remain on pending status. So here I see all the invoices for me to approve. Okay. So no longer there's excuses. I'm not in front of the laptop. And so this is how it looks in a mobile, in a desktop, or in a tablet. This is how it looks like. A bit more information as the screen is wider. And I can also check, of course, the PDF. Let me just click on one of them. These are two old records. Let's see, also this one. Yep. So this is how it looks. I will get the supplier number, how it was booked against the voucher match. I have the invoice number, the document in JD Edwards, the date of the voucher. I have the PDF. Here I have some details, the purchase order, net amount, cost difference if there was any, and then I can approve or reject. Okay, it looks a bit nicer than JD Edwards application. So you can get that with Appshare. So hopefully now this flow makes a bit more sense. I tried to focus in many different stages, but you can see how we can enrich your accounts payable process today. So we add, of course, auditing, traceability, and especially control. Well, some concepts that I want you to take from today onwards is that we have everything working in one application. From one application, we book different kinds of vouchers in JD Edwards. So if in today you have 3, 4 menus to do different kinds of invoices, you would only work with one with APA, and it would cope with all document types that you work today. Not only that, the setup can be maintained there. The escalation feature, to help you reach out and bring traceability to the invoice. So after a while, it's funny, and we are working on some reporting that you can tell which suppliers are require more attention, and maybe together with the supplier work on some improvements to optimize the process. It helps a lot to reach out to logistics and to have all pending on logistics, so you can see where the pain points are in your organization, right? Why you can't have your AP up to date. We offer the hold codes, so the hold codes are used on the escalation, but I can also, for instance, if it's a duplicated invoice and I want to prevent any colleague to book that invoice, I can book a hold code with a password, right? And it will be set on APA forever, okay? And not being able to process. The approval workflow for cost vouchers, as we explained a bit quickly, is by account ID, supplier, and company. We can also make more generic configuration based on cat codes based on the chart of accounts. But again, during the project, we discuss always the available options and we adopt the most optimal, let's say. On the voucher match, we have different kinds of workflows. So if you want workflows to take a look to the variance, if there's variances, or to just approve or ask for an approval regardless if there's variances or not. So we have different criterias, and they are always based on the buyer, the purchaser, the person who raised the PO, right? Like I said, at least for variances, for no variances, we can configurable threshold amounts. So if we don't want to approve invoices up to $10,000 dollars or euros, or regardless of the currency, we can do so. We can set some thresholds and different groups of users, like on this print screen here. And regardless of what is presented by the setup, so automatically suggested, you can always override the workflow. Okay, you can send to specific personnel or a group of persons to approve. The document repository, this is also included with APA. So this is the technology behind storage of the documents and being able to see the document all across the system. This is what will make you work paperless, okay? So we can make this available in the accounts payable, account ledger inquiry, you name it. We just need the transaction number to link to the PDF, and that's it. No excuses to use paper. The UMapper I did not went through, but if you have any queries around this is the no-code tool that we have to enrich the information to accurately book your invoices. This is how we recognize a supplier, a company, where we define the criteria. Some examples from our install base. If you work with custom tables, this tool works with custom tables as well. So if you let's imagine you store additional supplier information somewhere else in the system, we can use UMapper to retrieve that same information and present you the accurate supplier. As an example, we have customers matching purchase order lines to match based on supplier item cross-reference, others with delivery notes on the receipts processing. Well, there's plenty of opportunities with the UMapper, and this is what will lead to really high rate of matching. This is included, and all this logic around to suggest the accurate data is no code, so it's just configuration. You can make templates depending on suppliers or sources of information. So with different templates, different calculations can be done. And also important to mention is that the templates are automatically recognized. I mentioned in the beginning, so if you have an OCR in-house, we can work with it, or any other provider to help you the transition from paper to electronic invoicing. Okay. Again, the template automatic recognition, regardless where you dump the files, the system will know which template to use. It will find the supplier, it will find the file type. So not much needs of maintenance there. And yeah, this is indeed the tool to read, to translate, and enrich the metadata to suggest accurate matching. I think I showed you also the mobile app. Yeah, feel free to reach Ashley about this as well. They can be implemented in a combination, or if you have AppShare already, we can make the apps available for you to work with AppShare, with APA. Minimum requirements for APA. We only support 9.1 onwards with these tool sets, and mostly because we rely a lot on the UDOs, as you can see, all those fancy features to have the menus displayed with icons and also the PDFs and the XMLs to be in require this tool set. And it's all user-defined objects, so standard features of Oracle that we use. So I haven't heard much of you today. I don't know if you want me to go back to a particular stage of the presentation, or if you want to address any challenge you face today. Feel free.
Nelson, it's Keith here, MRC.
Hello,
I
Keith.
just wanted to ask one question about the XML templates to start off with. That last screen was the UMapper. So obviously we've got our own set of suppliers that we need to map. In that. Is that correct? Or how will you start off? Because obviously you start off with a blank slate, and then how do you start to populate UMapper to the XML that gets generated from the paper invoice or the PDF invoice?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, it's an excellent question, Keith. So during the implementation, we will present you with the numerous templates already that we've been building, coping with different electronic invoicing formats. And it could be due to legal legislation in your country, or even based on the provider or OCR that you have in-house, okay? So this is configuration that we do during the implementation. If, of course, there's training involved, so if you want to keep your templates or supplier-specific templates in the future, you are trained to do so. But often, one generic template works with them all. So if you work with the OCR partner, you only need one template for all the suppliers. So do not expect much maintenance there unless you want to jump into really specific details of one supplier or many. But I can tell out of our install base, there's rare supplier-specific templates.
Okay, so that UMapper template that you showed at the last slide was basically the mapping fields for standard mapping fields that you already have as
That's correct.
Yeah. Okay. So
I
if
can
there's
share
any
you. I can show you quickly here the preset, the templates that we offer, just to get a rough idea. So we have here the UMapper setup. So just as an example, okay, Keith, we offer, let's say, this number of templates. These, the UBL, they are specific to e-invoicing. So we cope with different versions, right? So imagine that you dump all the electronic invoicing files in one folder. The system will know which version to use, okay?
Okay, gotcha.
And this is where, jumping into a bit more detail, how we tell the system, okay, this is how you find the supplier, and we can define multiple criteria. Okay, just as a simple example. We can look for a supplier based on bank account details, on tax ID, on name, email, this is where we make that sort of mapping. So all the fields that you saw on HAPA, like document company, invoice number, these are normally mapped to a special field in the XML, yeah. But there will be no supplier giving you the JD Edwards address number, right?
Yeah.
So
No.
in situations like this, we need to fetch the database, and we can define multiple criteria to do so. So you can imagine already this is where the project will rely more time to implement. But just as an example, what you see here on screen is already provided. So we check with tax ID, which we think is the most accurate, or additional tax ID. We often put the bank account details as well. And then we work during the implementation phase to optimize this, of course. Okay.
Okay. Yeah. Good.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Nelson.
Yeah, just a quick one on from my side. Does your purchase order need to match line for line the invoice? So if my invoice has 10 lines, can my purchase order only have one line, which makes up the whole thing, or how would that work?
You mean one line? So the matching is always line by line on the purchase order, right? A bit like standard JD Edwards. I don't know if you mean like partial receipts, right?
The more I will raise a purchase order for 100 euros. But the supplier, one line for 100 euros, but the supplier invoices me on the same invoice 50 euros, 20 euros, and 9 euros.
I see. Yeah. That works perfectly. All the three lines could be matched to one purchase order line. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So, now that was my only question.
It works both ways, Michael. Okay. Well, it works with many lines of invoice towards one line in the purchase order, and the other way around. It also works like, because if there's the other scenario as well where the supplier only sends a summary line with 3 POs. So that can also be handled in APA. So it will consume from, let's say, the earliest receipt. It will start to consume the received amount using a specific criteria. Okay.
No, I was just concerned that the example that Michael used here, so will it then, it cannot match 100%, so it will go out as an error for you to go and manually match.
Correct. Yeah, correct.
Yeah. So you've got that option there. Yeah.
Yeah, if it's not automatically, let's say, the system while importing will validate the content, right? If it's totally fine and it sees no errors, we can enable the system to process the vouchers automatically. To be honest, there's no customer that enable that feature because they always want to take a look.
Yeah.
But if there's an error, there's no way the system will process it manually or automated. It has to be manually. It needs human intervention. Let's call it like this.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm quite happy. I must say it's very interesting to go paperless and everything is visible. So the minute you send it to the buyer to resolve, it's there. They cannot say that I haven't received it, or things like that. So
yeah,
I'm very happy with this.
Good to know. It's literally empowering AP, because often when we do these implementations, AP, and I did many implementations of JD Edwards, is a department that handles a lot of pressure, right, due to payments and so forth, and we are giving extra power to them to explain, I haven't done the payment because the goods are not received or the pricing was wrong, So everything, I think, even for the data quality across the organization, it's increasing a lot, right? So the purchase department will start to have ownership on the on their process like never before. Let's say it like this. So it's good for all areas. It's really nice, and it's all the time well accepted within the organization.
Just final question for me, I think, what is the typical implementation length? So from purchase order, how long roughly does it take to implement APA?
Well, it takes, it depends a lot on your organization, to be honest. We had customers where we went live in the very first month, others that took 1 year. So it depends on the complexity and how easily you adopt changes. But in a normal situation, I would say a couple months would be reasonable, at least to start with a good percentage of voucher match.
Perfect, thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Nelson, and for everybody that's joined the demo this afternoon. We really do appreciate the time that you've taken out of your day. If you do have additional questions, please feel free to drop me an email. I'd be happy to answer any further questions you have. I see Nelson's put up a slide of some of our APA customers that we currently have, and obviously we've got a few that are still in the pipeline with their implementation in process. So if you would like any information on any of these references, you can also ask for that. Otherwise, yeah, Nelson, is there anything else you need to add?
No, just also feel free to reach me if needed. On the Steltix website, also worth mentioning. So if you type steltix.com/APA, you would get the product information. Okay, so feel free to reach out there. And roadmap and release notes. This is where you can get a cool idea of how often we update the system and what's coming with the latest version. Okay, so yeah, feel free to browse. Let me know if there's any questions.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, everybody, and we'll be in touch with that recording.